got an interesting topic to talk about today.
Hey, we're back.
Listen, MashUp TV is a production, okay?
We're so excited today that we have our special guest.
I'm going to say what I got to say. I'm going to say it with my chest. Welcome to a special episode of MashUp TV.
Hello, everyone.
Hello, I am Jerry.
And I am Brian, a.k.a. BIM, B-I-M.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
I'm really trying to push my BIM name.
Oh, you really trying to push that?
Yes, because
Okay.
I want my first middle last name. You know, people call me BIM since college. And I never really tapped into it for real. And so it's BIM.
Okay.
Like him, he, him, BIM.
BIM. You know what? I like that.
Yes.
It's kind of like he, him, BIM.
He, him, BIM.
You have your own pronoun.
Oh, my God.
I am going to do a better job of just introducing you as Dr. BIM.
Thank
that is like your name, like
period.
From now on.
Yes.
We are so excited today to bring you this special episode that we are pre-recording. We are talking about loneliness and connection. We have two experts that are going to join us today. They are psychiatrists. They have been practicing for multiple years. They are writing a book on this topic. Dr. Mawuena Agbonyitor and Dr. Hasani Baharanyi.
Hey, y'all.
There you go. That's good.
Thank you for joining us today on
Yes.
MashUp TV. How you all doing today?
Doing great.
Yeah,
Thank you for having us.
Yes, we definitely appreciate you all for having us.
All right, so can you start off? Tell us about a little bit about yourselves. Where are you based?
Sure, I'll start. So thank you so much for pronouncing my name correctly. My name is Mawuena Agbonyitor. We both are based in Atlanta. I've been working as a psychiatrist around 7 or 8 years now here in the Atlanta area, originally from Maryland. And yeah, just really happy to be here today.
And I'm Dr. Hasani Baharanyi. As Mawuena said, I'm based out of the Atlanta area. I am originally from Alabama, but I've been here in Atlanta or this area for about 8 years and working as a child, adolescent, and adult psychiatrist here.
How did you all become friends?
So I know the story.
Uh-oh.
Mawuena has always been just a wonderful friend in my life, and she helped me out from the very beginning of our days we actually went to Harvard College. So I met her within the first week of being on campus, where I was looking for a place to open up my banking account. And you know, you're 18, you're trying to handle all these adult responsibilities while getting used to a new place. And she actually told me I should check out Cambridge Trust, and she provided some good advice. So we've been friends ever since. So almost 25 years.
How's the experience going to like Harvard and being like Black people at Harvard at the same time?
Yeah, it was an experience. So, you know, Boston, even though it's in the North, I think it's well known, has had some struggles with race relations, and, you know, that carried over into Cambridge. So one example would be generally people would say like, oh, don't go into Dorchester, right? But for us, the Black students, they would specifically want us not to go to South Boston, while generally for the other students, they were told not to go to Dorchester.
Or Roxbury. Those are the Black parts. Dorchester and
Roxbury were the Black parts. Mm-hmm. But for us, we were told specifically not to go to South Boston because that's where a lot of like hate crimes occurred towards people of color when they were in that neighborhood. So
this really is a totally different podcast. I mean, you could have a whole episode about the experience of Black students in these majority white or predominantly white institutions. Harvard is sort of like the quintessential one where you're a minority, you're coming from all different places, you're dealing with your own sense of like imposter syndrome, and there are people there who are hostile towards you. You know, you create this sense that you don't belong, even though we have the grades, the scores, and we deserve to be there just as much as anyone else.
On the flip side, I will say, though, that it was also an environment where you weren't shamed for wanting to learn more, to be curious about the world, for being ambitious or being smart. And we were able to make a lot of ties with a lot of other students of all ethnicities and races, but specifically being pre-med, you know, other Black students. So, you know, we've been able to carry those friendships into now, decades later. So
that's beautiful. I think even when I think about that, I think that's a great segue of like being in a place where there's a bunch of people, but still feeling kind of isolated and separated which really kind of goes into our topic of loneliness. Even though a lot of us live in major metropolitan areas, we're surrounded by people all the time. We have so much connection through the internet, and you can go in bars and stuff, but people are still suffering from loneliness. Can you all share a little bit about the epidemic of loneliness?
Sure. So, I think loneliness entered our consciousness a bit more in this post-pandemic era that we're in, especially the early days of the pandemic where, we had to stay at home. We weren't able to congregate in the ways that we were used to. But actually, there were a lot of indicators of increased loneliness even prior to the pandemic, especially amongst the elderly and also amongst young adults. So our previous Surgeon General from the previous administration had noted loneliness to be a public health emergency because it has impacts not only on your mental health, but your physical health too. Some stats around the effect of loneliness and social isolation on our physical health is that it can cause up to a 50% increase in the risk of developing dementia, a 30% increase in risk of stroke and cardiovascular disease, and a 25% increase in early death. Creating connection is so vital to our health and well-being as humans.
And I would just add, just to get you a sense of the scale of how much of a problem loneliness is, 1 in 5 adults feel socially disconnected in the United States. And some stats even cite up to 1 out of every 3 people are experiencing loneliness. And that number gets even higher with elderly. So 25% of the elderly, and according to the WHO, experience loneliness. And then about 5 to 15% of adolescents experience loneliness. So when you think about the short-term and long-term consequences of loneliness, like there's a lot of people who are at risk.
I am really appreciative of you all framing this conversation pre-pandemic because I never really thought about the topic of loneliness before the pandemic came. And then when the pandemic came, I'm one of those people. I don't know if it's my Aries nature, but I like, I like being around people. I like being outside. So like having to be inside during the pandemic really like made me sit with the fact that like I literally wouldn't do good being like in a loneliness state of mind because it started like giving me thoughts of depression and just having to sit with like things that maybe I haven't dealt with. But I think about our community. So MashUp, our primary mission is to focus on health disparities and social inequities for the Black LGBTQ community. And about a year or so ago, we started this group for our 50 plus LGBT community called our Timeless Jewels. And we don't allow nobody to call them old people that like, okay? They are our Timeless Jewels, okay? Because they are with us forever. Their wisdom is timeless. And so we create this beautiful group. And the more and more I think about the fact that like this group could potentially create a space for individuals who are 50 plus who are lonely. But I'm almost touching on 40 and I already see like, the way things go on. I don't want to be lonely when I get 50 because it's really depressing. So let me just ask you all in reference to like our community in this conversation around loneliness, can you just kind of give an overall understanding of what you all have heard about LGBTQ loneliness, particularly after the age of 50?
So all the stats that we cited earlier get worse for marginalized communities, including Black LGBTQIA plus communities. In part, as you can imagine, because of some of the exclusionary attitudes that they face on a daily basis. So if somebody is marginalized, ostracized, that feeling of loneliness is just going to get even stronger. So all of the risk that the general population faces, it gets amplified.
I think even thinking around that, one of the things that I remember being like a young gay in like the club was
young gay.
Yeah, you like a young gay.
What age is that?
I mean, technically, I'm still a young gay.
Oh, okay.
When I was like 19 and 20, going in the club, I remember seeing some of the older gay men and looking at them like in the club be by themselves and always looking like I don't want to be that older gay man by himself. And I never thought about the loneliness that some older Black queer people, especially older gay Black men who have survived the AIDS epidemic.
Oh my God.
And how many of their friends they have lost. And a lot of the people that they grew up with were just not there anymore. And now like they've survived, they're a survivor, but now they're in this world that looks totally different. Dating looks totally different. A lot of the people that are around their age, there's not a lot of them. who made it through that epidemic?
Okay, I was not, this conversation is real. I actually did not think about this before we, had this conversation. But Jerry, you just made me think about something, and maybe y'all psychiatrists can help me out with this. I really realized that maybe I have like a fear of loneliness. Side note, I used to live in Atlanta, and my number one favorite club in the entire world is Bulldogs, right? When I was like in my early 20s going to Bulldogs, I would see those older men in the club, and I was like, I don't never want to be that. And I told my friends for the past 10, 20 years, I was like, y'all, when I turn 30, I'm not going to go to Bulldogs anymore. And so I was just in Atlanta about a week ago, and I was like, oh, this might be the last time, because I told myself at 40, I wouldn't do it at turning 40 next month. But I was having so much fun. I was like, damn. And then my friends made me feel good, because they was like, you don't look like the old person yet. I was like, yes. But I'm sorry, I'm being silly, but seriously, like I realized that I may have had a fear of being that person who was older in the club and looking like the creepy old person. But now, like, you're making me think about the fact that what if I'm lonely? Like, I still want to go out and have fun. I still want to like be around people. I don't want to be in the house and get real depressed. And
Nor should you be. We are wired as human beings to want to have connection. Like evolutionarily, we survived better when we were in groups. So this is something that is normal and natural, that desire to want to be a part of a group, to be amongst people. So never something to feel bad about or ashamed of. Jerry, you had mentioned about a lot of people lost their peers during the HIV and AIDS epidemic. That could be one of the reasons that compounds loneliness for people of a certain age group. On the flip side, though, there are some strengths amongst the LGBTQ group in that some people may have been, isolated from their biological families.
Yeah.
And so there's been a tendency to create family amongst friends, amongst people that you're not biologically related. To generalize, people are very good at being able to do that. And so I see that as a strength. Like, even you're mentioning that you created this group for your timeless jewels, not even thinking about, could it be an impact of loneliness? Just thinking about like, hey, it's another space to bring people together and create connections and to expand family. So I just wanted to point that out as a strength also. It's not, even though the effects are very real and something that we should be aware of, there's beauty in that too.
Well, Black queer people have always had to find their chosen family.
Right.
Yeah.
They were not always accepted by, the family of origin. So I think that, to Dr. Agbonyitor's point, a resilience factor, a strength, even though that comes from some really tough circumstances.
Exactly.
And I think that, I was just thinking about this sense of like loss that of Black queer people from a certain generation. And that really helped me think that they not only may be feeling sort of isolated because they're getting older and feel like they're no longer like as sexually desirable as the person in their mid 20s, they've seen friends no longer be here anymore. And so that may complicate their feelings of connection. They may feel like they don't want to lose anyone, like they've lost friends in the past. So you all have really just sort of cued me to sort of think about that sense of loss and how it connects to loneliness.
Mawuena, I like when you were talking about the effects of loneliness on health, and the connection to it. And, this is one of the reasons why we as a organization that focuses on health disparities, why we focus so much on building community and making sure that people are able to connect in safe spaces and to share information and to be able to build these strong social connections. Even though the queer community, like we said, has always been good with making chosen family, but sometimes we need help, especially this post-pandemic world. And this really, it has informed a lot of our work. Why have you all chosen loneliness as a subject? Like, how did you all get into it?
So I lived in West Africa for a bit, right before the pandemic, actually, in a more collectivist society and in a smaller town primarily. So it was very easy to make connections. The people that you're there with, you form bonds. They become your family in a sense, right? While you're there. And so then coming from there to the US, where I have a lot of friends, a lot of family, a lot of connections. But the way our society is built, it's harder to find those collective spaces where you can make connections, where you can meet up. It's harder for things to happen spontaneously and naturally, like compared to my time living. I was in Sierra Leone, specifically upcountry Sierra Leone. So I felt like, and then on top of that, the pandemic was going on. So we really weren't allowed to connect. So I felt that kind of difference very sharply. And then hearing in the news a lot about loneliness and its impact, and that it was a public health emergency, us as mental health experts and practitioners, we felt like, hey, I think this could be helpful to provide people with practical tips on how to create connection in our environments, in our spaces that's not really built, especially in urban areas, let me say, in the US, it's not really built to do easily.
And I think for me, the catalyst was like both personal and professional. So I'll start with the professional part first. I saw a lot of, in my practice, I see a lot of people who are anxious, depressed, dealing with lots of stress. And there were some common themes like early family experiences, like family trauma. But a lot of people were isolated. A lot of people were getting their connections through their screens, but having a much harder time connecting with people like physically in person. And I was just kind of curious about that. I was like, could this be contributing to anxiety and depression? And, through our work, we found like, yeah, that is a risk factor. Being lonely, it increases stress, it increases anxiety and depression. In terms of my private life, and I think Mount and I both kind of had a similar experience, when we were training to become doctors, like, that's a pretty intense experience when you're working more than 40, 50, 60 hours a week. And it's hard to make those connections. And I was in Boston for my psychiatry residency. There was a moment one time during my second year of training. It was around Christmas time, and I was just profoundly lonely. Wasn't necessarily connecting with my colleagues. Like I had like one or two very close friends while I was training, and I was feeling super down. I was feeling burnt out. I was feeling over it. I think that was my experience of loneliness at the time. It was a consequence of being lonely because of that situation. And so I really wanted a guide that I would have given to myself like over a decade ago to say, okay, well, these are the things that you can do to kind of pull yourself out of it. These are the exercises to just try to combat that sense of loneliness and build connection.
Yeah, if I can add, I think what we're pointing to is that loneliness is a universal feeling. We're all feel lonely at times. That's normal and nothing to be ashamed of. More, it's we're hoping that providing information, when you recognize that that's happening, you can feel like you're equipped with tools to kind of create connections to counteract those feelings that you're having. But to feel lonely in itself is not something that you should feel means that you're defective or people don't like you. We all feel lonely at some points in our lives, and this is normal.
First thing I'll say is I think one of the good parts of this conversation is understanding, what that looks like. Because like until we had this conversation now, I really didn't even realize I had like a fear of one day being lonely getting older. Clearly that means I don't even know, like I never consciously thought about what were those things I need to be paying attention to that adds to that fear. And maybe like I'm already, feeling that in some sense right now and don't even recognize that that's actually like a part of my thinking. What are some of those subtle experiences or feelings for people to recognize, oh, I think I might be battling a loneliness spell?
So there's a difference between loneliness and social isolation.
Okay.
So social isolation is where you don't have a lot of relationships that you can count on, or you might think of someone who lives out in the boonies, maybe lives by themselves, or it could be someone who is maybe in a retirement home away from their family. Loneliness, though, is when you feel a deficit in the amount of relationships that you have. So loneliness, you could be married and feel lonely because even though, and in a happy marriage and feel lonely, because even though you have a great marriage with your partner, that person can't fulfill all roles that we need in our lives, right? You can have children and feel lonely that live with you. You can live in a house with lots of people and still feel lonely if you feel there's a deficit in the amount of relationships that you need to feel socially fulfilled. So I did want to point that out, that it doesn't necessarily mean that you're totally by yourself, that you are lonely, because you could be someone in the middle of the woods and your neighbors are a mile away, but you're happy and you're like, I'm cool. Well, just knowing my neighbor is there and you don't feel lonely. You got the birds, the trees, and the water, and you're chilling. So, but we would say, okay, maybe you're a little social isolated, but you're fine. You know, you're not feeling any effects of that. So there's that flip side, and then on the other side, for those people who are married, have children, or live in a home with a lot of people, to not feel ashamed that you're still feeling lonely. You know, again, it's the amount of relationships that you need to feel so socially fulfilled is what you need, and that's okay to recognize that, and then to try to do something to fix it.
I think that is like so amazing.
Yeah, that was the best
And
way I've ever
like,
heard it explained, for sure.
yeah, the difference between like being socially isolated, enjoying being by yourself, because you shouldn't feel bad just because you want to be by yourself. So I think that's great. But also bringing awareness to like some people just need more interaction, or you may need like a certain type of interaction,
Right.
and not to feel bad about being, one to seek that out, which I think can feel weird for a lot of people,
Right.
to be able to say like, "Hey, I need a different type of interaction," especially when there's someone else, because you don't want to make the other person or make your partner feel bad, but really it's just you need something different.
Exactly. That's exactly it. Yeah.
I will say that, I'm always thinking about like conversations with my friends and, really trying to push and dissect this conversation. First, I'm glad I got that distinction because I think it is automatic for us to think, oh, loneliness means somebody sitting on the couch for weeks and weeks by themselves and not talking about it, to actually paint the picture of like, I could be in a room full of family and friends and still feel like something is missing. Thank you for that perspective. I will say that I'm just thinking about a conversation I had with one of my close friends who, when he is going through certain seasons, he retreats to just being in his house and not want to go out and not want to do anything. The way he explains it is like, actually, this is like my safe space, but also where the friends hear it is, oh no, you're sitting at home depressed and you have to slit your wrists. And so I think this conversation is good because it's also helpful for people who are around people who are experiencing loneliness to kind of understand that number one, it's not personal. And number two, maybe let me give you some grace, the fact that actually maybe you being in the house is better than you being out around a whole bunch of people being even more depressed because you're like, this is not what I need right now.
Yeah.
Right.
Give them a chance to let them tell you what they need. And I like what you said, Brian, about respecting sort of their boundaries, respecting their wishes at the moment. And you know that it's seasonal. So it sounds as if your friend is going to come right back around. I don't know if it's springtime
He
or...
back outside now.
You had no reason to worry. He was going to make his way back outside. But yeah,
Uh-huh.
extending him that grace during the period of time, I'm sure he appreciates that. And you kind of demonstrate that you're truly a friend that sort of knows what he needs.
Right. And we'll be there when he's ready to
Let's come back out.
emerge.
And he emerged at Bulldogs with me a couple of weeks ago. Okay.
Oh, there you go. Of course.
I want to get to talking about the book that you all are writing together,
Yes.
which is so amazing. I got a chance to read the introduction and one of the chapters for it. I love it because it really talks about the epidemic of loneliness and really provides a very practical guide of how to manage loneliness and how to really kind of build up your social connections, and gives people very practical ways to start making connections. Can you like start talking about like the practical approach to managing loneliness?
I think we really sought to imagine the reader as someone that we would work with in our practices.
Yeah.
So break it down. So the first thing, whenever you help someone through any kind of mental distress, we want to understand what the problem is like. So first, it's identifying what is loneliness. And we actually start off with the scale to kind of help people identify some of the signs or characteristics of loneliness and like the sense of severity. And then from there, we go into, well, you've identified that you're feeling lonely. What are some of the steps you can take? This is based in something called cognitive behavioral therapy, which is a type of therapy that involves connecting your thoughts to the emotions to the behaviors that you have. And so one of the first things we do as far as interventions is to help people recognize those cognitive distortions or thinking mistakes that may be keeping that loneliness feeling like entrenched in a person. So that is identifying the thinking mistakes that make it hard for people to connect to others. And then we get into like problem solving. Once you identify the people that you want to establish a connection with, like how do you navigate conflict that inevitably comes up? Oh, but actually, even before that, how do you even start a conversation with someone? Like, what are the ways that you reach out to and approach a stranger that you think may be interesting, or that a person that you're working with that you haven't talked to before, but are kind of curious about or wondering about hanging out with them outside of work. So we break all this down into, I think, very practical steps. And because people who are experiencing loneliness may feel really stressed about the idea of connecting with others. So we go through some of the ways that you can just calm down that fight or flight stress response that we all have, but that for some people gets really activated in social situations. We try to be as thorough, but also as clear and accessible as possible in our book.
One of the things that you all talked about is there's a scale for loneliness and like you can kind of measure it. I never really thought about like, oh, how lonely am I? Like, how do you measure someone's loneliness? And what is the state where like, oh, I need to do something about this?
I would say, it's not even about scales, it's about your own feeling, right? So if you feel like, because our need to socialize with others is so ingrained, is so strong, if you're feeling like, no, I do feel like I'm not getting enough socialization, the relationships that I have, I still feel like there's something missing, I'm still feeling like I'm not as connected to others, I'm not feeling fulfilled with the relationships that I have, that's enough of a cue to say like, okay, let me figure out how to create more connections with others to fill that need, fill that void. Because we know kind of internally what we need and the resources that we have. There's only so much time we have in our lives, right? And relationships take time. You don't have to wait for it to reach like extreme levels before you take action.
We don't want people to think of the scale that we use as something that is a cutoff, like, above this number, you're lonely, because loneliness is not an official psychiatric diagnosis. It's,
Correct.
It's
a human feeling.
It's a human feeling. But one way I think we would both like people to use the scale is to just try to track their progress. So maybe like at the beginning, they get a certain output a number out. And then after going through some of the steps and interventions in the book, then they just assess again and see if they feel the same. And hopefully we'll see a decrease in that sense of loneliness as measured by the UCLA, but also they will know it within themselves too. Like once they have great connections with people, once they establish more friendships that are fulfilling, that's enough. That's proof enough that the interventions or the suggested guides work.
So one of the things I thought about as you were talking about that is the usual thing is like, okay, I'm feeling lonely. Maybe I need to go out, meet more people. I need to talk to more people, see if I can make more connections. But maybe sometimes people feeling lonely is because they don't have deep enough connections. And maybe sometimes they need to cultivate some of the connections that they have and deepen those.
Correct.
Can you kind of talk to like your experience with that, or like how do you help clients recognize the difference between the two, how to navigate that?
Correct. Yes. No, I think it goes back to that definition of loneliness, of feeling like the relationships that you have don't satisfy the needs, the social needs that you have. To your point, this is why you could live in a house full of a lot of people and still feel lonely if you don't feel connected to them, if you don't feel that you can rely on them, if you don't feel like they would have your back, if you don't feel like they could be a sounding board, all the things that we need to kind of feel like we're seen and valued in the world, So I think that's an excellent point. It's not even just the number of relationships, it's the quality of relationships, which is also why if that person who was living in the woods but can rely on their neighbor, they know, hey, if winter comes and the neighbor's gonna check on me, I'll check on them. They got my back, I got theirs, and I'm chilling. That person doesn't feel lonely because then the quality of that one relationship is all that they need to fulfill their social needs. I think that's a really good point, speaking to the depth of the relationships as well. It's not just the number. The thing about the number is that the more people you connect with, the more chances you have to create a deeper relationship with someone. Not everyone in our life is a deep relationship, right? We have people who are acquaintances, some who are close friends. So the more people that you're able to make acquaintances with over time, maybe that could form into something deeper if that's something that you wish and need at that point in your life.
Yeah, this is making me think of like what is a true friend. So I think about the reliability. Are they supportive? Do they believe you? Do they understand you? But also, like, can they call you out on some of your stuff? Like, you don't want someone that is just sort of a yes person all the time. Like, a true friend helps you grow and develop as a human being, and that means not always agreeing to everything that you say. That takes time, as Dr. Agbonyitor brought up, and that takes an investment from you too. That takes a willingness to be vulnerable with them and be able to receive their vulnerability.
Yes.
See, that's just spoke. I mean, some people are lonely because they're not vulnerable.
Yes.
Oh,
Okay, can I just go left for just a quick second and we can come on back to the center? As we've been talking, initially my mom was kind of focused on like the 50 plus community, right? And as we've been talking, and I'm always, I be thinking I'm a psychiatrist and a psychologist myself. But I'm always like trying to find some kind of connections to people's childhood to why they experience some of the things they experience as an adult. We were having a conversation the other day about people knowing when their LGBTQ status at early age, and then now having to grow up in a house with, maybe mom, dad, brother, sister, family, big family, but you feel lonely even growing up in your household as a child because, people see you as the other, or they see you being a different person, and like how that impacts, your adult life, as it relates to loneliness. Have y'all seen any connection with childhood experiences and adult loneliness at all? And do y'all serve children clients?
Yes, we are child, adolescent, and adult psychiatrists. I think, definitely for me, during the early days of the pandemic, when a lot of the school was virtual, kids were really suffering. And it's because when you're in school, you have a large peer group. That's a very easy way to make friends, make relationships, and to learn what it means to be a friend, to be in relationships with one another, to be in community with one another, right? And so when that's kind of taken away, it is a very, very hard adjustment. When we specifically think of youth who are LGBTQ+, if you're in a family and they're not recognizing all the parts of you, you're not getting that validation for who you are as a human being, right? Which is so important for us to feel safe. This is why it's really great that there are safe spaces for LGBTQ plus youth to go to, where they can have that side recognized and feel like the totality of them is accepted, right? Because that's what we need as a basis. Safety in a relationship is like one of the foundations, right? If you don't have that safety, the relationship can only go so far.
And Brian, when you were talking about sort of that early experience of childhood, I mean, I'm thinking like even early childhood, like if there's no firm attachment between you, the child, and a parent, before they even sort of grapple with questions such as like identity, then that sets that kid off on a rocky foundation. And certainly if a kid is, coming to terms with whatever identity they have, whether it's trans, non-binary, being queer, and they feel that there's some hostile attitudes or like, and even in their own family, or they feel excluded because people are picking up on like, they may be more feminine than they're supposed to be or more masculine than they're supposed to be, then that's going to be really hard for them. And they're not going to be able to have that firm foundation that I think is really important to build any kind of connection on. So I think that particularly, Black LGBTQIA plus people are at risk for these reasons.
And to kind of broaden it, the impact of discrimination is very, very real. If we just speak about Black people in general, Black female maternal mortality in the US is high across the board, even if you have a high income status, even if you're able to access good health care. That means that there's something about being Black in this country that puts you more at risk and your baby at risk if you're pregnant in terms of your health status. And so, of course, the more identities that we add that are discriminated against, the more that this compounds. And I think that this speaks to this fact of not feeling accepted in the world and always having to be on guard, and the trauma and stress reactions that fuels in your body and can have obviously negative health outcomes, not only for your mental health, but your physical health as well. So I wanted to put that out there. That discrimination is real, and we only have so much control, right, over systems. Part of the contribution of this book is to learn how to or attempt to create safe spaces where you do feel like you're fully accepted and you're loved to combat all the things that are going on around you. And I think that people who have been marginalized are good at that because they've had to be for survival. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And so one of the things I'm hearing, and like I think we don't always really think of it this way, but making connections with other humans is a skill. We are learning how to connect with other humans as we're growing up, as we're, in our households, we're being socialized.
Right.
We go to school so we can learn how to deal with other people, make friends. All these help us build our social connections, help us learn how to connect with people. So if you grow up in a household where you are not really connecting with your family members don't really talk to you, they may not, hug you, they may not, show you affection or be vulnerable with you, that may affect your ability to connect with other people as an adult and may attribute to chronic loneliness, especially in today's digital age.
Mhm.
Yeah, have been studies to widen the lens a bit about men in the US in general. And I think you can apply it to all men. Women are more socialized to create
Mhm.
community, to create relationships. Men and definitions of masculinity that we have in this country don't reinforce that. Definitions of masculinity are that you can only show certain emotions, right? Like anger and neutrality, really. You can't express fear, sadness, even though this is totally normal. There's a sense about self-reliance. You're the one that everyone has to go to and depend on, but you're not able to depend on other people. So I think all of that socialization obviously doesn't lend itself to feeling like, oh man, like I'm feeling lonely. Let me try to reach out to others because that source of vulnerability that you've been socialized means that you're not really a man. And then even if you are like, okay, let me try to make relationships with others, sometimes it could become a catastrophe because you've, again, not been socialized to know about reciprocity in a relationship, knowing how to show up for people, not just in terms of material provisions, but emotionally as well. And so there's a whole epidemic now of online dating and how single men are finding it really hard to navigate the dating scene, unlike women who, yeah, they may not be, and obviously, sorry, this is from a heteronormative lens, but women who may not be having dates, but they're still fine because they have relationships with their friends, with their family. They're still having all of those sources of their
You, Brian, they've got relationships with you.
Yes. So I want to get back into some of the things that you talk about in your book. You talked about the cognitive distortions that happen because of loneliness. Can we kind of identify some of those things?
Yes, yes, yes. And I want to just clarify that the cognitive distortions can fuel those feelings of loneliness. So, someone, for example, may be prone to a lot of black and white thinking, which is kind of like all or nothing thinking, like something that's all good or all bad. And if you think about it in terms of the loneliness or connection context, it could be a person that's going out trying to make a friend with their coworker. The one interaction doesn't go as well, and they say, okay, well, this is horrible, and let me completely give it up. Or they can say, well, this interaction was great, and so let me put all my eggs in this basket with one person. And we really want people to be able to adopt more nuanced perspectives or nuanced assessments of how these social interactions go, because connections are not going to be always clean. They're going to be messy. You're going to have to deal with some hiccups and bumps along the road. Another one would be doing a lot of mind reading or personalization. So that's making assumptions about what the other person is thinking. So say, Brian, you go to, someone that's working in the organization and they're not in the greatest mood and they have like a flat response to what you said. And then you can go and start to make all sorts of assumptions about what that response is. Oh, they don't like me, or they think that I'm too much right now. And that's a lot of mind reading. You actually don't know what they're saying. But because you think that you know, and because you're drawing this conclusion, you may be less likely to kind of continue to build and cultivate that friendship. Other ones are like some people do a little bit of catastrophizing, which means that, and that's another cognitive distortion where you just think about the worst case scenario. So, I go out, to a bar. And so this is fantasy. I haven't been out in a long time, but go out to a bar and then, meet someone. It doesn't work out that well, or the interaction doesn't work out well. And I think, oh, I'll never be able to communicate with someone ever again. I'll never be able to make a connection like that, a positive connection. So that's an example of like just going to the worst case scenario, and we call that catastrophizing. And those three are just a few of the thinking mistakes that can really, hinder and restrict some of the ways that we want to connect with people, ways that we can connect with people.
Jeez, I feel like I need to book y'all to be my psychiatrist or something, because I feel like y'all stepping all of my toes.
We have the answer. We've got ways to start.
Let me read that book. I need to read the book.
We all have these kind of thought distortions, right? We all do it. Even if we don't have a mental health condition, we all do it. So he's talking about recognizing it. And then in the book, there are ways that you're taught to kind of challenge it, so that then you're able to not let that influence the way that you act, perceive the world, and behave with others.
So can you all give 1 or 2 ways to deal with that? Like, especially if I'm doing like the all or nothing thinking, like how do I keep myself from doing that?
Yes. So say after you recognize it, you see that you tend to do this in a variety of contexts. You've established that this is a pattern for you. So one thing that I would suggest is sort of writing things down, like writing down that thought pattern, and then take a pretty clear and as objective look as you can about the facts supporting that. It has to be a fact. It can't just be an opinion. So one thought could be, if it's all or nothing thinking, I'll never be able to make a friend again. Well, actually look at all the friends that you made in the past. Like the facts support the actual reality that you have made friends in the past. Even it goes back to elementary school. You have made a friend in the past. And then also look at the facts that may be supporting the cognitive distortion. Hopefully you'll see that there are fewer facts supporting the distortion than there are supporting the opposite. And then based on that assessment of facts, you then just kind of create a more realistic thought. You try to replace that automatic cognitive distortion with the more balanced and realistic thought. And then you just kind of do that with all of these thoughts, all these cognitive distortions that may be getting in the way of you making connections. It involves some effort for sure. I mean, not super complicated, but it involves sort of taking a hard look, close look at your thoughts, and then going through, seeing what facts support the thoughts, what facts don't support it, and then creating an alternative thought.
So like the facts that support the facts that support the facts that don't, is that like a worksheet or something? Because I feel like that need to be some assessment or something I can do with some of my friends.
Yes. Well, don't weaponize it. Give it to them out of grace and love. Because it's called a thought record. And there are many of these. I mean, our book includes a version of it, but there are also thought records online you can get for free that walk you through the different columns. So you would just sort of write down the thought. There's a little bit more to it in terms of like the emotions that may be attached to certain cognitive distortions. So because one could be it makes you feel anxious, or it makes you feel sad, or it makes you feel really angry. And, those are tough emotions that we all have, but, that can make it hard to decide you want to connect with others. So there are worksheets that can walk you through those different cognitive distortions.
See, now I feel like I'm be playing psychiatrist a lot of times with my friends, because I'm like always going through that type of analysis with people. All right, so what happened? How did it make you feel? Okay, you say this person was horrible. What actually happened? All right. Is there another way to interpret this situation?
Yeah.
Is it possible that maybe they were having a bad day? No? Okay, sure.
No, absolutely. Yes. That's very good friend work that you're doing. Yes.
I need to stop and tell them to go see you.
And go read this book. Okay? We need this book to sell 1 million copies, okay?
Buy a few copies and hand them out to your friends.
Right.
Start there.
Yes. I will probably do that, because some of these people need it. What are some of the other exercises that you walk through in your book to help people battle loneliness?
Sure. So another way is that we approach loneliness through a problem-solving lens where we help people to really narrow down a specific, because loneliness feels really big, walk them through how to narrow down one way that it's impacting their life, and from there, problem solve techniques they can use to address it and as a way to also create more connections. Also, we kind of break down how to initiate conversations, how to engage people in conversations as well, because as we've been talking about, sometimes this is maybe things that people haven't been taught, or just need more guidance on how to approach it. We also try to give practical techniques on how to just go out there, and put yourself out there and start making connections with people, because sometimes for some people the best way isn't to start in the head, but just to start with action and
Yeah.
see what follows from there. And then we try to approach like different situations that might arise and thwart connections. So what to do, to not be afraid of potential conflict that may come about, to kind of recognize that these things take time, even though you may feel impatient. It's okay, to create that depth of relationship that we were talking about. It can take time, but in the meantime, you can still feel how to kind of approach the journey of creating connection and find joy in that process in itself. And then lastly, and I wanted to bring this up when I think it was Brian, someone was talking about feeling depressed. We also talk about how loneliness at times can be a banner for a legitimate mental health condition. And so how to kind of recognize any other adjacent symptoms that may be occurring with that feeling of loneliness that may, be a cause for you to seek out some type of medical or health professional support and treatment. Yeah.
And now I'm like thinking about like the fact that we all talked about loneliness being like a public health crisis. And also I guess depression is like a public health crisis as well.
Yeah.
And I guess I'm wondering, why don't we hear about this more? Like, how do we keep having these conversations about loneliness to ensure like people really know that it is a real public health crisis that we need to address?
Yeah, I think that we're starting to, but it just wasn't on people's radar. I mean, if you really think about it, mental health in general really started coming to like the national conscious within the past 15 years or past decade. And I think that's been because talking about mental distress was sort of stigmatized. There was a stigma against it. And so I think now the Pandora's box has been open, and we're looking at all the ways in which people's mental wellness is put at risk. And now I think we're coming to understand that loneliness is a part of it. So like the former U.S. Surgeon General making it something that he wanted people to focus on, the WHO, releasing statistics on it. I think that just shows that there's a growing awareness about this problem, but it's slow coming. And I think it's just because like we haven't given, mental wellness, mental health, the attention that it really has deserved. But we're starting to, which is promising.
So as people are going out here trying to make friends, trying to cure the loneliness inside themselves, what are some ways that they can do that? Really, we want to talk about how are ways that people can make new friends? Where should they go? Like, should they do?
Even though it is hard that we don't have a lot of social spaces in the U.S., urban U.S. specifically, that kind of fosters connection, there are places, especially if you keep your mind open towards wanting connection. So there
Which is really interesting. I'm so sorry to stop you right there, but like you said that there's not a lot of spaces that foster social connection. So are we saying that like hookah bars and clubs are not places that foster social connection?
they are, however, I guess for me, you see that as like an event. We don't go to hookah bars every day, right? I'm thinking in our everyday life in a small town, you often know your neighbors, for example, as opposed to you can live in an apartment building with 300 other people. You don't know who's living next to you in the city, right? While your neighbor in a small town might be half a mile away, but you know who you are. Again, it's about survival and having like more interdependence, right? Because there's less resources. That's one theory around it. So when I say about like every day, I'm thinking about like if you're going just about your daily routine, most people, you leave your home, you get in a car. You're probably by yourself. Then you go to work. Work could be a good place to foster connections, but some people want that separation between their work and their personal life. So some people have those blinders on and they're not seeking connection there, right? Then you get back in your car and you go back home. And then if you have kids, now you take care of your kids. You're prepared for the next day. You go to sleep, wake up, rinse, repeat. Because if you are looking like, hey, I do want to make connections, perhaps it's you do start at work, saying hi to your cubicle mate. It can start just like that, introducing yourself, having like friendly chats every day. And then that could build up if you guys have similar interests into something of more depth over time. If you guys decide, hey, maybe one day after work, we're going to go to a bar and get a drink or go get a coffee or go somewhere on a walk during your lunch break. Other places you can stop are your local library. That could be a good place to create relationships, especially if you're able to go and repeat. Green spaces, if you live near a park and you're going for a walk every day and you happen to notice there's also someone you always see going for a walk every day, perhaps with time you can introduce yourself. But I guess also why I say it's difficult is that a lot of times some of these things sound a bit creepy, don't they? Especially in urban areas. Like if you're trying to go for your walk in a park, especially as a woman, and someone is just trying to innocently try to introduce yourself, there's a way you have to approach it so that people are like, why are you trying to talk to me?
So how do you introduce yourself without seeming creepy? I will say, as a person who talks to a lot of people, to me, it feels like more of an energy thing. Like this person has an open energy. They seem friendly. Certain people that have very closed off energy, their body language, everything that they're like saying is like that they came out to this walking path and they're not looking at me at all. They seem like they're immersed in their own world. No, I'm not going to talk to them. But, if it's someone who's like kind of looking at everybody smiling and stuff like that, I may be like, hey, at least that's how I approach it.
You answered your own question. That's exactly it. That's how that's how you're not creepy. You look to see those cues if someone seems open to having an interaction, right? Yeah. That's the biggest thing. And the cues are kind of like what you mentioned, reading people's energies. If someone is focused, looking down, not looking around, seems in a rush. Leave that person alone.
Leave that person alone. The other people.
If someone's open up, smiling at strangers, taking their time, has a more relaxed demeanor around them, that might be someone to approach. And then when you approach, you're not all like,
don't.
You're not touching them.
You're like, hey, what's up?
No.
You keep your distance. You say what you got to say. You wait for their response. If they're like, that's it, and then looking away, then that's it. You go your way. They're seeming still engaged, active listening, giving you eye contact, wanting to converse more. Then you do that until the conversation has its natural end. So yes, Jerry,
Dr. Agbonyitor said something that I thought we didn't highlight enough earlier, was that active listening. So that's a portion of conversation that can really take you far, especially when you're meeting someone new. So showing that you are engaged, maybe repeating back what you've just heard in your own way, asking questions, nodding, those nonverbal cues can be really helpful in moving a conversation towards the direction of really connecting.
We always talking to Jerry and telling him to leave the person alone who like has their head down and they don't want to engage. That person actually is me. So like I'm like a socially awkward person, right? Like people would never know because they see me like in my role, like with MashUp and out in the community and stuff. Outside of MashUp, I'm not. It's really hard for me to like go into spaces and try to connect with people, even here in like Nashville. Like I'm like actually terrified to go places by myself. And so when I do like get the strength to go places by myself because I'm socially awkward, I'm the person who's looking down and maybe trying to look away and not trying to make the eye contact and wait for somebody to come up to me. The way you describe the person, and I'm like, oh my God, that's me. But I'm actually like a really nice, cool, amazing person that if you just like say hi to me, then I'll be like, oh my God, hey. And then like, then you'll see the other warm side of me. So
Brian,
go ahead, please.
I will say that there are two things that I would challenge you, like anyone else that has the same sort of experience when they're out. So just know that feeling that's maybe keeping you closed in is going to pass. It's like almost like a wave. So just allow that discomfort to do its thing, sort of go through you, but it's not going to stay at a high level for a long period of time if you do a couple of things. So first, I think knowing that it's reminding yourself that it will pass, and also don't go to your phone, because there's some people that when they feel that feeling, Next thing you know, they're like, head is in the screen. And
Wow.
that helps you sort of avoid the discomfort. And it kind of ensures that that discomfort is never going to go away. So you got to put the phone in your pocket, put it to the side, just sort of sit with it, maybe hold something else in your hand. Because you got to have something in your hand. And, challenge yourself to just sort of just look up, just look around. You don't have to stare at anybody, but just look around your surroundings. And that automatically cues people in, maybe cues someone like Jerry to say, okay, well, this person is open to having a conversation. And the other thing is, I would challenge you, and this is tough, and maybe our book can help you overcome that barrier, but like, I would challenge you to introduce yourself to someone, like just one person. And it doesn't have to be like a, hi, my name is Brian and I'm CEO of this organization. It could be like what Jerry said, like noticing something about the person, like, oh, I really love that watch, or I see you're reading this book, or I really like that blazer that you have on. And if they don't respond, if they don't reciprocate, if they don't see it open, then you just move on to the next one. But at least you've done that one sort of challenge for the day.
Yeah, I appreciate that. And I ain't ashamed to admit that I have like even fake been on the phone sometimes just to
Yeah,
avoid people just in that awkward moment.
we
Don't
all do that.
don't tell nobody.
I guess another thing I would add is also then the more you work on changing your outlook to look for connections, the more you're going to find it.
Yes.
Most innocuous, I've had in-depth conversations with the grocery person checkout lady where she's telling me her health history because of, some item that I bought. So connection can happen anywhere. And that doesn't mean that now I'm becoming friends with that person, but you start to feel like, oh, I'm a part of a community, right?
Yes.
Recognize that I'm here and I'm present. The more that you have those types of interactions, the more that can make you feel more comfortable with making more and more and more until you have those relationships that you want.
Every interaction doesn't have to be a long-lasting
Correct.
interaction in order for you to feel fulfilled or
Correct.
something. But just having like a random conversation with someone in the grocery store, someone at the community center, like, hey, this was great. Hope to see you again. I think those things do like feed us and they add to us. And just having a conversation with people and interacting with people just for the sake of interacting with them and exchanging energy is worthwhile and really adds to our overall well-being. I feel like learning to recognize the people who are like a little bit shy is a great way to find someone else to talk to. Be like, okay, that person looks like how I feel, kind of waiting on something to happen versus the person who look like they're upset that they're there and is not into it at all. I really do think like the more that you do it, the
Yes.
easier it gets.
Absolutely.
One thing I think is so brave, where I'm gaining my bravery in my loneliness journey, is that like we put our events on Eventbrite, and
Mhm.
every event that we have, we generally will have somebody who comes and who's never been to anything that we had going on, but they've come because they saw it on Eventbrite. And when they get there, I feel like they become like a part of our MashUp family, and we see them all the time. And so, like, I think like maybe I'm gonna start like getting on Eventbrite and just find random events to like to go to, that like look like something fun like MashUp or something.
Yeah.
And just go and show up. And then, like, like most times you go to those events, they will have an icebreaker thing, which is why I love icebreakers, because it like force you to like, introduce yourself.
Come to mashup events, first of all. Read Dr. Hasani and Dr. Mana's book and learn how to gain these tools, but also come out. These are great ways to just start building your muscle on how to connect with people, talk to people, and be patient with yourself.
From this whole conversation, can y'all just give us your best sermonette on what's the best takeaway from this conversation?
I would say like connections, the desire to connect to others is like ingrained in us. It's wired in us. And that said, though, loneliness is a universal experience, as Dr. Agbonyitor said. So whenever you're experiencing loneliness, just know that there are ways through it. There are ways around it. There are things that you can do to change that aspect of your experience. Not just, from the guidance that we provide in the book, but just like getting yourself out there. So I would encourage people to do some self-reflection, do the exercises, and also get out there and face the world. And we've got some tips on how you can do so, but it won't replace you taking that courageous step and facing the world and trying to build those connections.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree with Dr. Baharanyi. I think, again, not to feel shame about feeling lonely, because it is a normal human feeling that we can have. It's more having that awareness and let that fuel your desire to address it. Right. And that to have patience and grace with yourself. So when you're going out there and making connections, let the goal be to make a connection, not necessarily a friend for life. Put like concrete expectations and then just go through the process and journey to see what will grow from that. But to not feel shame or guilt around having those feelings, instead, to feel proud of yourself for taking a step to address this feeling that you're having, because it really has negative effects on your health. And so you are doing yourself a really beautiful service by taking action, and you deserve it.
Yes.
Yes.
Oh,
Yes.
that was a sermonette wrap up right there. Yeah, because you deserve it. Period.
How do people stay in touch with you all? How do they find out about, because the book is not out yet. How do they know about the book when it comes out? And then also if they want to connect with you all further, if we want to invite you all to speak.
Well, you can find us regarding the book on Connection on Instagram at ConnectionDocs, ConnectionDocs, and follow our page or DM us there.
Mm-hmm. And also, if anyone's interested in sort of one-on-one care or one-on-one service, they can find me on Psychology Today. That's the best way to reach me. I'm only licensed in Georgia at the moment, so I have to see people in Georgia. I'm not able to see people outside of Georgia at this time.
Thank you so much for your time and for this opportunity to talk with you and address your community. We hope that you all found this conversation helpful and informative and motivating if loneliness is something that's affecting your life currently. So thank you so much.
You deserve it. Period.
Yes, you deserve it.
Yes.
That's right.